It seems like lately everyone's asking me one thing: is winter over? In this video, we're going to answer that question as we take a look at the big picture patterns through the end of February and the beginning of March. And welcome back in, guys. This is Tucker Antico with your weather forecast. Be sure to subscribe if you aren't already, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Be sure to drop any questions you have too. I'm happy to answer all of them. Don't be shy. I wanted to start off this forecast with the winter report card, so to speak. And if you look to the right of me here, we have this great graphic from Ben Knoll. It tells us how much snow has fallen relative to average this winter. Areas shaded in blue stand out as places that have seen greater than normal snowfall, and the southeast really stands out there. So does the northwest, and a pretty good corridor through the central U.S. into the mid-Atlantic, as well as the interior northeast. These are all places that stand out for above average snowfall. Obviously, we had that huge storm in the southeast, which really changed the record books there. The northwest, if you watched my winter weather outlook back in November, you would know that was going to be a hot spot. We've had a couple storms in the central U.S. Great Lakes have produced a lot of snow, but some areas have been surprises in the north too. The north central U.S., actually I spoke about this in my winter outlook in November as well. It's been cold but relatively dry. Now the question everyone's asking is, are these places, at least in the north, locations that can recover and see winter return before the end of the season, or is it an early spring, especially for those places in the southeast that have already been to 80? We're going to answer that question right now. Before we get too far into the forecast, I did want to mention that as I'm recording this, it is very cold outside. Those dark purple colors marking temperatures below zero across a good chunk of the country. But of course, the question is, does this have legs? So let's jump into the big picture pattern and break this down further. I know a lot of you guys know this, but I am a meteorologist, and I can break down a little more of the science we're looking at here. So we're going to start with the upper level pattern. This gives us an idea of where those air masses are, and it tells us a lot about the longer range forecast here. So let's talk about what we're seeing. And right now, where you have these blue colors, those are temperatures that are a bit colder than average through a good chunk of the atmosphere. That's part of the reason it's cold right now. But we're moving this forward into the final week of February. I'm going to begin to slow this down as we get into February 25th and 26th here. And I want to stop it here because we begin to see this pattern start to emerge. What you're seeing is this ridge out here in the western U.S. that is called positive PNA. And what that does is it allows colder air to spill into the eastern U.S. Now, while you're not seeing many blue colors out here, I can tell you that the eastern U.S. will likely be colder as we get into the final several days of February, especially the northeast where you're seeing that blue bubble. So it's a sign that winter, it may be continuing in the eastern U.S., though there could be an early spring farther west, at least as we wrap up February. But the pattern continues to evolve as we head into March, and what you're really going to notice now is in these first several days of March, we actually see this ridge build across the Alaskan region. Now, that's a big deal. It's called negative EPO. And why this is a big deal is because it allows Arctic air to spill straight into the United States as opposed to coming at us from across the Pacific, where it's just simply not as cold. Now, you'll also notice we still have this signal that colder air is going to be sitting around the eastern U.S. So this says to me the eastern U.S., at least for the next couple of weeks, is likely to stay at least colder than average, if not much colder than average. Even in this pattern, the western U.S. here can get colder air to seep in. And so the thing that we'll need to watch is how well that mild air holds up out west. But I wouldn't be surprised, unless you're in the southwestern U.S., if temperatures do end up starting off March colder than average. We can move this farther even into we'll call it early middle of March. And what you're seeing now is a signal that this negative EPO is here to stay, and we're now seeing the reaction of that Arctic air spilling into the U.S. as that colder air mass shows up on some of our weather models. I will also mention that this may be a favorable pattern for snowfall in the eastern U.S., where storms are likely to develop between this colder and warmer than average region here. So the East Coast certainly does not look like it's done with winter weather. We can also take a look at some of the forecasts from the CPC, which we'll dive into right now. And here's the official forecast from these guys. You already got my thoughts, so we won't spend too much time on this. But you can see they are expecting the southern U.S. to be a bit warmer than average. I expect this is going to be shifted a little bit farther west than what you're seeing here. But I do agree that the eastern U.S., especially the northeast, is likely to see that colder than average weather. And with the potential for storms, like I mentioned out east, they are seeing the same thing, that chance for above average precip. And with the colder air, that certainly spells the chances for more wintry weather. Now we're taking a look at where snow is most likely using some of our weather models through at least the first week of March. And instead of taking the numbers here, we're going to use some of the numbers to tell us where snow is most likely. Anywhere you're seeing these red and purple colors, like these mountains in the northwest, that's a spot where over these next few weeks, snow is quite likely, and there may be quite a bit of it. Same out here in the northeastern U.S., though it's more or less the Great Lakes and once more the interior northeast. Snow is quite likely, as we were talking about just a moment ago. Still, however, even if it's cold, it does look like it'll be drier through the central U.S. here, a pattern that's really held on, of course. And in the northeastern areas closer to the coastline, all the way into the central U.S., that's sort of our battleground, where it could really go either way right now. That's the European model, at least. And if we take a look at the American model, it's a little more aggressive on snow, but it tells a similar story. Those mountains out west, likely to see more good snow, and I see that too. It's a very stormy pattern out here coming off the Pacific, and that's not going to change. Meanwhile, it is cold but dry out here, generally speaking, in the central U.S., and for much of the Northeast, especially along those lakes, it does appear like winter is certainly not over yet. But the question is, once more, this is our battleground, what wins, spring or winter? Right now, I do have a feeling we're going to see a bit of both. I expect winter's going to win out just because it will be colder in these spots, in my opinion. But whether or not we get the snow, that is a big question. And we'll take one more look at some of the potential for storms in the near term and begin to get an idea of what the pattern will be heading into March as well. We're going to take it to our European model. This gives us an idea of what may be going on the surface. And as I record this, we're talking about our next snowstorm just missing the northeast, but of course hitting the central U.S. pretty hard. After that's out, we have this very strong high pressure system that comes in. That's part of the reason it's going to be cold, and it will stay cold heading into the weekend, especially out east. And by the weekend, we're talking about the 22nd and 23rd. But that high pressure system, as you can tell in the near term here, it actually keeps our weather quite quiet. That is with the exception of the northwest, where more snow will be falling in the mountains out there. But as we continue to move this into the next week, so we're now talking about the 24th and onwards, you can see more snow coming out there across the northwest. We got a couple clipper systems that are going to be dropping out of Canada, but those guys don't drop much snow. Things do, however, start to change a bit more as we get into the later days of February. Remember that cold air comes into play in the northeast, and we begin to see a pattern here show up where storms start to develop somewhere in this region here and attempt to ride up the coastline. And with the pattern I was pointing out before, with that warmer and colder air clashing in the east, that's a sign that systems that do ride up the coast will be able to gain more power and have the potential to drop more snow, like our model's trying to show here. Now, I wouldn't take anything verbatim that it's spitting out at this point, but I will use it to give you an idea of those patterns like we're talking about here. A couple clipper systems coming out of the north and the potential for systems to develop, like I said, out here in the south central U.S. and right up the coast. Now, I'm not as convinced we're going to have systems cut north like this you're seeing here, but certainly this type of setup, perhaps off to the east a bit more, very possible, and something that we will be keeping a close eye on. And of course, you'll want to check back for these forecast updates as we continue to keep you ahead of the upcoming stormy pattern and any snow that's on its way. So with that, we'll wrap up our forecast right here. Like I said, if you have any questions, don't be shy, drop them in the comments. Please subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you made it this far. We're going to keep you updated and really talk science. We'll do some lives coming up here too. And be sure to keep a close eye on this pattern and the forecast over the next few weeks, as I do expect winter is going to last a bit longer. So we'll keep you updated storm by storm, and in the meantime, stay warm and enjoy what's left before spring really takes hold.